adult.
Keep coughing. Are you choking?
Summon EMS
911, we
personnel
have a
and
choking
obtain
child.
consent from a parent
I'm
or
trying to first
guardian.
aid. Can I help?
If no parent or guardian is available, do not delay care. Consent is implied.
Lean forward.
Depending on the child's size, you may have to adjust your height and kneel behind the child. When doing back blows and abdominal thrusts on a child, use less force than you would on an adult. Using too much force may cause internal injuries. If an infant is conscious but is unable to cough, cry, or breathe, she may be choking. Use back blows and chest thrusts to dislodge the object. Summon EMS personnel and obtain consent from a parent or guardian if possible. Do not delay care.
Call 911. Tell them we have an infant who's choking.
Carefully position the infant face down along your forearm, supporting the head and neck. Then lower your forearm to your thigh for support. The infant's head should be lower than the chest. Using the heel of your hand, give 5 firm back blows between the infant's shoulder blades. Be careful not to hit the infant's head. Each back blow is a distinct attempt to dislodge the object. Next, position the infant between both of your forearms, carefully supporting the head and neck. Turn the infant face up and again lower your forearm onto your thigh for support. To locate the position for chest thrusts, place 2 or 3 fingers on the center of the chest just below the nipple line. Give 5 chest thrusts. Smoothly compress the chest about 1/2 to 1 inch. Continue giving 5 back blows and 5 chest thrusts until the object is forced out, until the infant begins to cough, cry, or breathe on his or her own, or until the infant becomes unconscious. To review. If a conscious adult cannot cough, speak, or breathe,
coughing.
he may be choking.
Keep coughing.
Summon
Are
EMS
you
personnel and obtain
Call
consent.
911. We have a choking victim. I'm a trained rescuer. Can I help you?
Stand slightly behind the victim.
Lean forward.
Give 5 back blows. Give 5 abdominal thrusts. For a child, follow the same steps, but you may need to adjust your height or kneel.
Lean forward.
Back blows and abdominal thrusts are not as forceful for a child as they are for an adult. Remember to summon advanced medical personnel and get consent from a parent or guardian if possible. If a conscious infant cannot cough, cry, or breathe, she may be choking. Summon EMS personnel and obtain consent from a parent or guardian. Position the infant face down and give 5 back blows. Turn the infant face up and give 5 chest thrusts. For victims of all ages, continue giving back blows and abdominal thrusts or chest thrusts until the object is forced out, until the victim begins to cough, speak, or breathe on his or her own, or until the victim becomes unconscious.
Hey, are you okay? You okay? Hey, Mike, call 911. We have an unconscious victim. 1, 1,000. 2, 1,000. 3, 1,000.
If during the initial assessment you find an unconscious victim and your first 2 rescue breaths do not make the chest clearly rise, you might not have tilted the head back far enough. Reposition the airway by tilting the head farther back and try 2 more rescue breaths. If your breaths still do not make the chest clearly rise, assume the airway is blocked. Remove the resuscitation mask and give 5 chest thrusts. To give chest thrusts, kneel at the victim's side next to the chest. Place the heel of one hand on the center of the chest. Place your other hand on top and lace your fingers together. Position your shoulders over your hands. Keep your elbows straight and your fingers off the chest. Press down about 1.5 to 2 inches with each thrust. Give 5 chest thrusts.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Then, grasp the tongue and lower jaw between your thumb and fingers and lift the jaw. Look in the mouth for a foreign object. If you do not see an object, replace the resuscitation mask. Open the airway and give 2 rescue breaths. If the breaths still do not make the chest clearly rise, give 5 more chest thrusts.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Use your body weight,
1,
not your arms,
2,
to compress
3,
the chest.
4, 5.
Look in the mouth for an object. If there is no object visible, replace the resuscitation mask and give 2 rescue breaths, followed by 5 more chest thrusts. Each thrust should be a distinct attempt to force the object out.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
If you look in the mouth and see an object, use your finger to try to remove it. Replace the resuscitation mask, open the airway, and give 2 rescue breaths. If the breaths make the chest clearly rise, remove the resuscitation mask. Look for movement and check for breathing and a pulse for
1,
no more
1,000,
than 10
2,
seconds.
1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, 5, 1,000, 6, 1,000, 7, 1,000.
Care for the
8,
conditions you
1,000,
find.
9, 1,000, 10.
Continue chest thrusts, foreign object check, and rescue breaths until your breaths make the chest clearly rise. The victim begins to breathe on his or her own, or another trained rescuer arrives and takes over. If you're caring for a woman who is obviously pregnant or known to be pregnant, adjust your hands to a position slightly higher on the chest to give chest thrusts. If you find that an unconscious child has an obstructed airway, follow the same steps as you would for an unconscious adult. If your first 2 breaths do not make the chest clearly rise, reposition the airway by retilting the child's head and try 2 rescue breaths again. If your breaths still do not make the chest clearly rise, assume the airway is blocked and give 5 chest thrusts as you did for an adult. Hands on the center of the chest, shoulders over hands, elbows straight and fingers up off the chest. Chest thrusts for a child are not as deep as those for an adult. Compress the child's chest about 1 to 1.5 inches deep. Give 5 chest thrusts. Grasp the tongue and lower jaw, open the mouth, and look for a foreign object. Because a child's mouth is small, if you see an object, you may need to use your smallest finger to try and remove the object. Replace the resuscitation mask, open the airway, and give 2 rescue breaths. If the breaths still do not make the chest clearly rise, continue chest thrusts, foreign object check, and rescue breaths. Chest thrusts for a child may also be given with one hand. After attempting rescue breaths, remove the resuscitation mask and place one hand on the child's forehead to keep the airway open. Place the heel of the other hand on the center of the child's chest. The depth is the same as for 2-handed chest thrusts. About 1 to 1.5 inches deep. For an infant, if your first 2 breaths do not make the chest clearly rise, reposition the airway by retilting the infant's head and try 2 rescue breaths again. If your breaths still do not make the chest clearly rise, assume the airway is blocked and give 5 chest thrusts. To care for an infant whose airway is blocked, follow the same steps as you would for an adult or child, but modify the way you give chest thrusts. Keep one hand on the infant's forehead to maintain an open airway. Place 2 or 3 fingers on the center of the chest just below the nipple line. Smoothly compress the chest only about 1/2 to 1 inch. Give 5 chest thrusts. Each chest thrust should be a distinct attempt to force the object out. You will need to use your little finger if you see an object and try to remove it from an infant's mouth. Replace the resuscitation mask, open the airway, and give 2 rescue breaths. If the breaths still do not make the chest clearly rise, remove the resuscitation mask, continue with chest thrusts, foreign object checked, and rescue breaths. To review, if your first 2 rescue breaths do not make the chest clearly rise, reposition the airway and try 2 breaths again. If your breaths still do not make the chest clearly rise, assume the airway is blocked. Give 5 chest thrusts.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Look in the mouth for a foreign object. Replace the resuscitation mask and give 2 rescue breaths. If the breaths still do not make the chest clearly rise, continue chest thrusts, look for a foreign object, and 2 rescue breaths.
5.
If you look in the mouth and see an object, try to remove it with your finger and try the 2 rescue breaths again. For a child, use the same steps as for an adult, but only compress the chest 1 to 1.5 inches. Remember to use your little finger to try and remove any object. To give chest thrusts for an infant, use 2 or 3 fingers on the center of the chest just below the nipple line and compress the chest about 1/2 to 1 inch. Use your little finger to try removing any object you see. Continue with chest thrusts, foreign object check, and rescue breaths until your breaths make the chest clearly rise, until the victim begins to breathe on his or her own, or until another trained rescuer arrives and takes over. CPR is similar to the compression cycle for unconscious choking, but there are more compressions in each cycle, and there is no need to look for an object in the airway.
1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000.
If during your initial assessment you find that an unconscious victim does not have a pulse and is not moving or breathing, kneel next to the victim and find your hand position on the center of the chest, as you learned in unconscious choking. Position your shoulders over your hands and give 30 chest compressions.
1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Compressions should be fast.
10,
30
11,
compressions
12,
should take about 18 seconds,
15,
about 100
16,
compressions
17,
per minute.
18, 19, 20, 21,
For an
22,
adult,
23,
compress the
24,
chest about
25,
1.5 to 2
27,
inches deep.
28, 29, 30.
After 30 compressions, reposition the resuscitation mask and give 2 rescue breaths. Each breath should last about 1 second. Leave the resuscitation mask in place and quickly move back into position to begin compressions again. Counting out loud helps you maintain an even pace. Keep your arms straight and your fingers up off the chest. The down and up motion of each compression should be a smooth motion. Let the chest come all the way back up before you press down again. When you come up, don't take your hands off the chest. Just take your weight off the chest. Watch for the chest to clearly rise to make sure the breaths are effective. Once you start CPR, continue until an AED is available and ready to use, until another trained rescuer takes over, until the scene becomes unsafe, you are too exhausted to continue, or until you notice an obvious sign of life. If at any time you notice any obvious sign of life, stop CPR and monitor the victim's ABCs. If the victim is obviously